Welcome to the Prof Talk Pod, brought to you by the Engaged Professor. Every 2 weeks, join us as we talk about tips and tricks to help you connect with your students, engage with industry, and stay up to date on all the teaching trends. We'll give you actionable strategies that will help improve your teaching today. Thank you for being here. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Prof Talk Pod for part 2 of talking about attendance and engagement and what my partner, my co-host today, Katie, calls the practical side of attendance and engagement strategies. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, as always, for having me.
So we actually had an interesting off-camera discussion post part 1, so we thought we'd start there with part 2, and it was around doctor's notes. So, Katie, I actually want you to start by sharing what happened at IU a few years back.
Yeah, so excused absences is sort of where we're going, like the excused versus unexcused mentality. And if you listen to part 1 of this, you will note that we kind of ended the previous conversation by talking about like the most important takeaway here is figure out what your university's policy is first and then move on. And so a nuance that I did not bring up in this in part 1 that I could start part 2 with is the nuance of doctor's notes of to what extent we are allowed or should accept documentation from our students to support whatever they have, whatever excuse they have for missing a class or an assessment. It could be anything. So in 2017, I was on our campus's faculty council's student affairs committee. So the committee that evaluates and sets a lot of policy for the campus, the Bloomington campus of Indiana University. And we made a pretty controversial decision that year as a group that was supported heavily by the dean of students office and our health center, our medical facilities and center, which is that we are no longer we're no longer allowed to accept doctor's notes of any kind. It's not just the IU Health Center, it's at all. I am not allowed in my capacity as a faculty member to accept a doctor's note as proof or evidence of an emergency. And that was pretty controversial. It made a lot of people pretty upset for good reasons. And I think it was a really good decision for good reasons as well. The people who were the most upset, as you can imagine, Becky, are the people who have a lot of students to deal with. 800 to 1,000 in our jumbo classes at the business school per year or per semester, sorry. That's a whole lot of students that now you have to make a judgment call. They said no longer allowed to accept medical-based documentation. Instead, work with your student individually and make a judgment call about that absence. But I think it created tremendous equity in our university. Every time you set foot, and I tried this one time actually. Every time you set foot in our campus's health center, it's $40. Whether or not a doctor sees you, whether or not you have anything wrong with you, you just set foot, and it's $40. And then you get a doctor's note that says, I laid eyes on this person. It doesn't say the person was seen by a medical professional. It doesn't say that that person is sick. It doesn't say there was any sort of treatment. It just said, I laid eyes on this person. Give me $40. Here's a note you can give to your professor. And so it wasn't a meaningful indicator of a student being sick, or having an emergency. Rather, it was an indicator of the resources a student had and was willing to expend in order to get excused from something. And it created a lot of inequities in our school. And so we got rid of it. It also had a lot of HIPAA implications, by the way.
Yeah, I know. I've always thought that was
my student's medical history. I don't want to know why
yes.
you're in there. I can
When
see you
I don't
every
want
time.
it in my position. I don't in my
Yeah,
possession. I don't want it in my email because I don't want to
totally.
accidentally have it go
Yep.
somewhere. Yeah, I
And
will
I
say,
didn't know.
so for me, generally speaking, my general response to students is, I don't want your doctor's note. I don't need to see it. I don't need you to give me one. Honestly, if you would like to make up an excuse to miss class that says more about things you need to examine in your own character than it does about the work in the class. So I don't need to see your doctor's note. I have one exception to that, and I just did this year, and I didn't love it, so I'm probably not gonna do it again. But was I'd give one exam. I give very few exams, but I gave one exam in my icons and influence class because I needed to test if they understood levers of influence before I asked them to apply them to social media icons and celebrities, right? So I use it actually as more of an assessment of what their knowledge is before we move on. And we do pen and paper, which is fun. But to miss that exam for any reason, they do need some sort of university letter or um, doctor's note. And I did not love doing that. And I probably won't do that again. Exams are tough, right? Because making
Mhm.
them up is difficult and scheduling makeups and do you do an additional exam that's a different we're not talking about that today, but that would be the only reason why. But I kind of love not being able to accept them because they just feel like there's a lot of bad things that can happen, and also I don't necessarily think you should have to disclose to me that let's say you went to the doctor and found out you were pregnant, like, you
Mhm.
I don't need to see the doctor's note
Yeah.
saying that you are, sick you have sickness because you're pregnant or that you tore your ACL or whatever it is, like, that's not really my business. If you wanna share it, great, but forcing you to miss a class, I don't know if I feel great about that.
So that you hit on what I liked about this policy a lot, its implementation, which is that it takes the burden off of me to make that choice. I say I'm not allowed to accept this. When we have conversations about, and I won't say attendance in my class, but just kind of extraneous stuff going on, um, student issues. We have a conversation. Say you're welcome and not required to tell me why this is going on. A lot of students end up disclosing a lot, but also there's a timeliness piece to this, I think, which is the inability to just produce a bunch of medical documentation at the end of the semester to forgive transgressions that have happened pretty much consistently the entire semester. And you hit on a very, I think, important point, Becky, about the attendance with assessments component, which is when we give exams, like sort of what do we do? I'm not a jumbo class instructor, but I'm friends with the jumbo instructors, and I'm talking about people who have very large, like auditorium style lectures, 100 to 250 students per section, 3 to 4 sections a semester, sort of. We're talking very large scale, and they simply cannot manage, that level. And so I've heard a couple of strategies to that end that work. One is that they have a miss an exam for any reason. You have to let me know, 6 up to 6 hours. I'm making this up, but a certain amount of time, say 6 hours before the exam. And then here is the makeup exam date and time, and it's pre-scheduled. So if you miss this, you have to let me know. The reason doesn't matter, but you have to tell me that you're missing it, and you have to tell me the reason you're missing it. And then here is the makeup date. And if you can't make the makeup date, which in advance is there, sorry about you. The second strategy that I've heard, and this is not just in jumbo classes, it's my colleagues who have consistent 3 to 4 exams a semester, is you drop one. So I have
Yeah,
4 exams in a semester, you drop one, regardless of reason,
yep.
regardless of reason. And I think,
Everybody drops 1, right? You could take all
yeah,
4 and drop the
everybody drops one.
lowest,
So that
yeah.
means you don't take the final. Fantastic. If it means that, you decided to skip the third one because you were at a wedding, great. But you get one. You get one. And I think that those two strategies are really good for exam based classes, are a really good moderate sort of middle ground of accountability, which is we get it, emergencies happen, or like just stuff happens, right? Here's your alternative. You still have to do something though, right? This is your alternative, and these are your options.
Well, and I actually think that fits really well as we think about what are some practical approaches to measuring attendance and engagement. So, some things early on that I tried, I mentioned already that I would do like the sign in sheet. I haven't done that in a lot of years, probably after my first or second year of teaching. I kind of stopped the sign in sheet and shift to more what Katie and I talked about, which is we have in-class activities. You have to be in class to do them.
Mhm.
You turn something in, it is reviewed. Sometimes those are partner activities, sometimes they're individual reflections, like they vary. They might be a case study, like it's pretty broad range of things, but they have some sort of thing that you turn in that I evaluate. There are most of my classes, I still do this it mostly this way. I have 100 to 150 points, so usually around a quarter of their
Yep.
grade is around those in-class activities, there are typically not typically, there always are more than they need. So let's say there are 10 25-point activities throughout the semester, and they can get 100 points. Usually there's 24. So if they miss 4 classes, they can still earn 100 points. Still possible, but then they just missed those classes. It's fine. I don't even need to know why you missed. Basically, it gives you 4 free skips. Now, for me, the challenge with that is that I will still get students who are saying, "Well, yeah, I missed, but, like, that one should be excused," so that they often will treat those like free skips to not go because I don't wanna go, not skips to use when something happens, and that's where that is challenging for me.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I like the free skips. The I run into this a lot where people just sort of like ease into the semester and like, "Oh, I don't know, feeling out whether or not I need to attend," and then something does happen, and they're like, "Oh no, I needed that back," and I was like, "Right, but
It
you."
happened.
Becky, I think I have a very similar strategy. Some slight differences that we'll talk about. One of the components that I think is really, really critical when we're talking about meaningful assessment of this stuff is eliminating the excused versus unexcused language. I'm trying to look at my find my syllabus right now. It's the end of the semester as we're recording this. I don't know where I am, but I'm pretty confident I have a line in all of my syllabi that's functionally like I don't delineate between excused and unexcused. I don't care. And that I drop 3, I'll just, like, explain kinda how I do it. I have a very similar approach to you, and this is uniform in all of my classes. So in a 16-week class, I have what's called synchronous activities, and I in a 16-week class, I account for about so that's like 32 days, but not really. We have finals, we have the week before finals. So I have about 20 meaningful teaching days. Of those 20 full meaningful teaching days, 18 of those are assessed for engagement. And then of those 18, so I have 18 synchronous activities. They're on the syllabus, they're announced, they're not pop anything. I drop 3. And I set up our course management site in Canvas to automatically drop the 3 lowest scores regardless of reason. Um, Now, I have a whole bunch of students who attend every single class and get full points for all of those every semester without fail. That's fantastic. And then I have students who, I alluded to this in the previous episode where I have, or a couple of episodes ago, where I have some students who I've not seen all semester who just choose to take the L, if you will, on 25% of their grade. And while that's like not great, not my issue. And so eliminating the delineation between types of absences. I have a line on my syllabus that says I'll drop your 3 lowest synchronous topic activities, regardless of whether you attempted the activity, a low score drop equally to a 0 score or a non-attempt. Please don't contact me asking for a makeup opportunity, time extension, or an additional score drop. Um, all now they still do. Okay. All of these are team-based activities, and that's what makes my grading a little bit easier. They love that part. They love because it's practice. It's just practice. It's scenario-based. It's real world. 15 to 20 minutes at the end of every single class. They can leave when they're done, and it's 100% team-based. In my more qualitative class, they all submit one together. In my quantitative based class, they actually submit most of them individually, and that's because they can disagree about numbers. And they're graded for content. They're not just like do this and then you're like done. I actually do. They're 5 points each. They're a very low value opportunity. Um, in total, they make up like sort of about 15 to 20% of my total grades in the class. I try to keep them very low stakes, but they count. And if you miss or if you're not doing well on them, they count. But the team based component of the engagement is meaningful for them and also is a motivator for them to attend. There's a lot of peer pressure actually associated with that because
Was
it's embarrassing if you're the only
would
one on your team
and you set them up as teams, like, they work through the whole semester
the whole
together.
semester. 3 to
Yeah.
4 students. I have 14 teams of 3 to 4 students in a 50 to 55 person class. So 14 teams, 3 to 4 students per team. I send out a survey at the beginning of the semester. We can do a whole podcast on teamwork.
That'd be
Um,
good.
that basically says these are mostly random, but let me know if there's somebody you don't want to work with. And then other than that, it's mostly random. They work the whole semester in their teams. And what's nice about that, the benefit is they do their final assessment in my class starting off in teams. It's their only team assessment in the whole class, but they already know their teams really well. It's not like they sat the whole semester and did nothing with a team and then they get a rando assigned to them
Yeah, I
at
think
the
that
end.
that team-based piece, for some peer accountability is also when we think about mimicking, if you really are trying to mimic, like, life, right? Like,
Yes.
that does usually we are depending on others, and if others aren't there, it makes our job harder, and so that kind of does give them a more realistic view of what it means to show up outside of school.
Yeah, and there's peer pressure associated with that. I mean, I witnessed a couple of teams this semester where teams would have a teammate who consistently would not show up to class, be late, have fake emergencies all the time. And what that led to was a lot of reliance on their teammates to get the work done. And I heard a lot about it in the team evaluations, the peer evaluations at the end of the semester. They didn't attend class, and so they were always behind when we went to talk about things. We felt like it was constant refresher. It mean it's impactful. Um, and that's the engagement piece. My students give me mid-semester and final course feedback consistently that that's their favorite part of the class. That we do a sort of mini discussion lecture, lots of practice problems, meaningfully engage. The practice problems in my qualitative class are more think, pair, which is teams, think, get together in your team, talk about it, think, pair, square, share only, like individual team based, which is only 3 to 4 people, entire class, super valuable discussions that lead us to that synchronous activity. In my quantitative based classes, this is quantitative practice problems, but I say go talk to each other, work in your teams, talk through this. And that is engagement to me. That really meaningful. There are stakes associated with this, but they are low. But if you're here, I promise you, I always say this, if you're here, I'm going to keep you busy.
Yeah, I
You're
think
going to be busy.
I think that as we think about attendance versus engagement, probably where I've landed is most of the time this very similar strategy that there are in-class activities. I really like the dropping of, they're pre-announced, when they're happening, you can drop this many. I would say the challenge will be, as we talked about last time with KU's excused absence policy, probably if a student came in and said, "Well, yeah, I missed those 3, but those 3, I had an excused absence underneath this policy," I probably would have to excuse those on top of more potentially because we have that university policy. Might be something that I will reach out to faculty affairs and get a feeler on because I think that for me, as I think about the challenges I have managing it, because when students miss an in-class activity, if they have an excused absence, they can make up that activity. But for me to manage excused absences, I mean, it's
So that's what
so
I was
much.
curious about with KU's policy. Um, is it like it? This is the list of excused absences. Do you have to follow that? I know
This
that's
is
like such a bad question, but like,
No, that's a good question. I actually have always just assumed, that, like, we have it, so follow it, but let me look into that.
yeah, because if that's the case, that's burdensome, right? Because I mean,
Here we
there
go.
are I had a student this semester, and I'll change names and facts and genders and everything to protect privacy, who was in a very bad car accident early in the semester. But in spite of being in that car accident, and that student told me what had happened like right away. I think it was during an assessment week, and there were a lot of complications, so some late submissions. In spite of all of this, and a lot of physical therapy, rehab complications after that, that student attended every single one of my classes. It's just that the workload outside of class was very burdensome for that student. I gave a whole bunch of grace, like probably too much, because of that student was being so communicative about the burden of that very tragic or very, not really tragic, but very complicated injury that had
Yeah.
occurred early in the semester. That's different from a student lying to me that they have a pink eye for 2 weeks, right? Because I can't verify that personally on my own campus. I can see their eyes. I don't want them to come to class, but
Right.
and so that the one thing I really appreciate about IU's health policy is you gotta get your students to talk to you about what's happening. Otherwise, there's, like, not a whole lot you can do about it, and it really saves me, to be honest, in grade appeals at the end of the semester. I had no idea you were going through that. If I'd known, we would've I had no idea. You just can't submit documentation in arrears. So that's what I'd be curious about, is, like, if you have to follow that or
It
if that's
looks
like a or if you can just say, "I don't," like I do, I don't delineate between excused and unexcused. It's not a thing. I
it
don't
looks
tell
like that is not an option. Like, here's a good question. They have a FAQ page. I bet they get lots of questions about this.
we do too. I have some
Um,
questions.
yes, yeah. So, yeah, it says you could still have existing course policies, but you might need to give additional accommodation and additional drops if students have excused absences. So, drops for excused absences should not preclude a student's ability to drop scores for other reasons. So that would to me, that would indicate that, yeah, you also need to allow them to drop on top of the excused absences. Now, I wanna start by saying, like, there are things I mentioned this, there's things I appreciate about having this because it's very clear, so, like, I don't have to evaluate those additional excused absences because there's a list, right? And I could say,
Yeah.
"This is the policy, that does not count."
Yeah, yeah, so the
So there's
judgment call for you is, like, a little
is a
bit
little bit easier.
how do you know they're being honest?
Well, you never do. I will say, I this is an aside. I make it a practice and have always made it a habit to believe my
I do
students.
too. No, I do too. Me too. Me too.
So, and right or
So do
wrong,
I.
I'm sure there
Same
have
here.
been times where students were not being truthful. I still let them make up the thing. I still let them turn it in late. You know, as always tell students, like, communication is most important to me. Communicate ahead of time. You don't have to tell me the details, but tell me that you need an extension. Tell me that you're gonna miss class, and I'm happy to help accommodate that. And I will say, generally speaking, like, if a student chooses to lie about that, that is something they're gonna have to work through about their own personal selves in the future. And honestly, I never know whether they do or not, so I don't lose sleep over it. It can be
Yeah,
frustrating, sure, but I don't lose sleep over it. But I think the challenge for me is, like, I like having an excused absence policy for reasons of reducing some of the judgment calls, but that means that if I, track anything in class, I have to I have to
you
track
can
excused
honor it.
absences, I
Yeah,
have to.
that's complicated.
Yeah,
That's
it is
really
complicated.
complicated. Yeah, that's something I actually don't it it's actually really interesting being, like, almost on opposite policy
Ends.
spectrums here,
Mhm.
given that our universities are similar size and caliber. It's very interesting. The burden of the conversation with the student was something that people were very worried about. What I have found increasingly with my students is that they actually don't communicate as much as you would think they do. Like if they're absent, they're absent. A couple times I have students like if I know that they are really busy with something, I have a student who's like an advisor or a mentor, I think is a better word for a big workshop on campus. She has to travel occasionally. I know that about her. But day to day, I don't have I don't have many of those conversations.
Well, and
But
that's what I was gonna say about it is, like, I do believe, generally speaking, that most of the students in my classes are not going to try to abuse the excused absence policy. And this goes back to what we talked about, right? Making an environment where students value what you're doing in the class. So they're showing up not only because you have an attendance policy and they get points for showing up, but also because they believe it's valuable. 10% of the students probably were giving me fake excuses. For the most part, I don't lose sleep over that because I can do what I can do and set policies to help students as best I can. Sometimes I don't help them all, sometimes I don't reach them all, sometimes I'm not teaching them the skill about why we can't be
right,
sick every day when, when there is a world, there is life. Like, life is happening whether you show up or not. Um, And so, generally speaking, like,
Yes.
it is
Yes.
burdensome for me to track is the real issue. It's like, I haven't come up with a better way to track that yet. That's actually my goal for this spring is for my TA and I to sit down. I get a TA in the spring. I'm so excited. Um, Also because she's awesome and I get to work with her. But to think about, like, is there a better way? Like, can I set up a Google form so this is not just blowing up my email and then it's searchable and I can look back at it and, like, so these are things I'm thinking about as, having an attendance policy and working within the confines of the options that we have. Now the other option for me, Katie, would be to just
Not do
not
it.
have an attendance policy, not having class assignments or having class assignments, still do them, but they can also be made up outside of class. The burden there is then again to make sure that students value coming to class
Yeah.
and also that they, and then also communicate to them what is the value of coming to class because they're not gonna know until class starts, so it's my job to front load what the value might be,
Yes. Yes.
but I still struggle, again, with but is it part of my job to help hold them accountable, at least to
Right.
provide some structure for
Right.
accountability? I don't there's no good
No,
answer.
I struggle with this too. One of the interesting things you said about the, like, help them see the value of coming to class, like, the first day of class, I actually almost go the opposite direction, it's funny. So this is a we have so many of these. This is a topic for a different day. But I have an open tech policy in my class. Use it
Same.
all. I don't care, whatever you wanna do. But the other side of this is I talk about that in class because many, many, many of my coworkers do not have this. In fact, we have, a school level, like, norms sort of set of guidelines, and one of those guidelines is a flat device. So I don't abide by that because in a technical class, many of my students actually use 2 devices. They use one to look at the notes and one to write, and so I that again, story for a different day. But one of the things I tell them is, you're gonna be really busy in here. You're not gonna be bored. You're gonna be moving around a lot. You're gonna be engaging with each other, interacting. This is not a lecture-based class. If you don't feel like today's your day, if you have an exam right after my class, if you broke up with your boyfriend, if you just want to sleep in, your 21st birthday was last night, whatever reason, please don't come to my class. And I say it like that. I go, please don't come to my class because you will not get value out of it. Your teammates will not enjoy your presence in my class. And your time is better spent elsewhere. And I know that that sounds counterintuitive, but it's a very good I think, motivator for them to say, "Okay, if I'm making this commitment, I'm actually doing it." Like,
Right.
I value to take a personal day if you don't feel like doing this. And there are those 2 days, total transparency, when I don't have synchronous activities, I know they're not gonna be motivated in class. Most of the time, I do the content asynchronously, or I do a workshop that day for their upcoming assessment because I get it. And so I think that realism, that, like, yeah, and I teach seniors, I want to keep that in mind. They're busy with a lot of different stuff. Mostly seniors. This would be different if we were freshmen or sophomores. I'm giving them an indicator of how I value their interactions in the class, which is if you're here, my expectation is you're like actually here mentally and physically. And the team accountability goes a really long way toward that. I do not do Top Hat. I actually don't know how to use Top Hat. I've never opened it in my
Me neither.
life. Some of my students told me that, like, those, like, Poll Anywhere, Poll Everywhere, or those tools are useful for them. I'm
Mhm.
thinking about integrating just like a practice sort of fun at the beginning of class every day, but for 0 points, like, totally anonymous. I don't care, just to get them thinking about the content or thinking about fun stuff as a review, a pre-class review as they're walking in. But I think, here's another topic for us to talk about later. I think it's so easy to commit academic misconduct using those tools. And I have
Yeah.
a friend who's doing this right now at a different university who has a sign-in sheet in a lecture hall and is running into, oh my goodness, unbelievable amounts of academic dishonesty associated with attendance. Unbelievable. And she said it was never like this in previous semesters because the structure of my classroom was different. We were in
Wait,
like a circle, not an auditorium, sort of. Yeah.
yep. I think the structure of the physical space also makes a great
There's
deal of difference in
totally
how you
does.
approached attendance.
So if you're not motivating attendance, correctly or in a way that's meaningful to you, the space, your spirit of your teaching, you can have some serious academic dishonesty issues. My students are not allowed to complete the activity outside of class with very few exceptions. Typically, like an athlete who's on the road, I know for sure. If you are outside of class and you're trying to complete that activity, you get hit with academic dishonesty immediately because I can tell whether or not you're in my class, right?
Yeah, so fun fact, something I started doing because I had 70 students, no sign-in sheet. How was I knowing if somebody was in class or not? Because I had to put the makeup assignment out there for the students with excused absences, so it was on Canvas. Everybody could see it. How did I know if you had an excused or unexcused absence? That was, like, the actual bane of my existence. About halfway through the semester, I figured out to add something for the in-class students that wasn't in the makeup assignment. So
Oh.
and then all I did then after the fact, right, was I would cross-reference when I got to their assignments and I was grading them, and the
Mhm.
in-class thing wasn't in it, I would cross-reference that with my email and say, "Did they have an excused absence or no?" And if they didn't, the first time it happened, I said, "You did not have an excused absence. You were not in class. Completing this as if you were in class is academic dishonesty. Don't do it again."
This is your only shot. This is your only
This is
warning.
it, right. So
Yeah.
that's one way that I've thought through that, but I'm still thinking through that as people who are thinking about maybe they want to shift more to this engagement-based assessment as opposed to just strictly butts and seats. If you do that, there's lots of nuances here, and there's lots of ways to think about tracking and excused absences and working within the confines of the policies at your institution. I know we only really got to share kind of these 2 ideas, and for really this one idea that we kind of both implement in different ways for attendance and engagement in this episode. But I think for us, the real point was sharing something that's beyond tracking attendance and more about giving them something tangible that they
Yes,
learn that you're
yes.
evaluating. I'm not going to use assessing because usually it's like, did you try? Did you think this through? You're going to earn the points. If you got the answer wrong, fine.
I actually do assess for
I'm
correctness
sure you do
in
because you
my
have
quantitative classes, and it's
quantitative,
because
yeah,
if they get it wrong, it has, like, a lot of implications down the road for them, but kinda back to what we talked about in the first episode, which is you must be accountable. You must find a way to motivate your students to want to come to your class.
yep,
That's really, I think, what it comes down to.
and build the structures and the things that they feel like they are getting learning and experience and practice, and it's helping them be successful on your major assessments. I mean, we could talk about if you scaffold your class correctly and backward plan and think about how every in-class activity supports the major assessments that are built around assessments and learning goals, like all of this comes together and it's easier to explain to the students why you need to show up. All of those things help to build the environment where students want to be there. And you're always gonna have like, for me, I have to track the absences if I choose to keep going forward with this type of in-class
Yes,
activities. My only option is to get rid of in-class activities or allow anybody to do them inside or outside of class,
which defeats the purpose.
which does defeat the purpose because the value is in being in class and working together and getting my help and guidance, and so, as
Yeah,
y'all
and
can see,
I
yeah,
think the drops have helped me with that a lot.
yes.
If you have the ability to do this, say, I don't delineate between excuse and unexcused, that gives my students comfort to, like, you know, not attend class because they don't want to. That's fine too, I don't care,
And
right?
that's what I love about your approach, Katie, and I would think if I had that as my option, if I was working somewhere I could do that, I think that would be the way I would go. I would structure how you're doing it. There's X amount of drops. You decide how many those are for how many days of in-class activities you're gonna have, and then you don't
Yep,
need to field emails.
and my emails are really short. It's no worries at all, Canvas automatically dropped 3. No worries at all, have fun, get
Good
well,
luck.
whatever it may
Yeah.
be, good luck.
Do
Yeah,
whatever you want.
do
Yeah,
it.
I do, and then again, that's,
And if they go, "Oh, I missed 5," I go, "Oh, that's okay. You got 3. It's great. Don't worry."
right, and there's lots of other points in the class, and for me, that's the
Yes,
main thing
yes,
is I
exactly.
constantly remind them, like, "Listen, I know you're really upset because you overslept. It
Yes,
happens.
absolutely.
Losing those 10 points is not going to derail your opportunity to earn an A on this course. It's not. It's gonna
Yes,
be okay."
exactly, exactly right.
So, Okay, cool. Well, I think we could keep talking about all the
I
challenges
forever.
related to this forever, but I do think there's some really good takeaways there, especially again, organizing your brain around grading engagement versus just sitting and showing up, and also going back to those policies to see what confines you're working within so that you know if you maybe can you just get rid of the whole unexcused excuse language altogether, or think about what tracking systems can support so you can still do the grading for engagement and not just showing up. And with that, we are going to sign off again for today. Please share this episode, especially with somebody who has been talking to you about their biggest challenge is attendance. That's been true for me for 10 years. I think it'll probably be true for 10 more because there's not easy answers to this. And if you have suggestions, comments, ideas, things you want us to talk about in the next episode, we would love to share those. So drop those in the comments or shoot them over via email, and we will see you next time.